I'm going to read the opening section on page 49, which is a description of Rana and I at a Thai monastery called Wat Pananacha, which is actually a monastery for Westerners, so we didn't have to be fluent in Thai there. Rana became fluent in Thai, I never did. And it's just a description of our sitting in a semi-open boat, as they call it, a building which was open to the outside, and we realized there was a snake, which we later learned was a python, actually. A 7-foot snake. It's not called a python in the poem because that's not how I experienced it until later. But I'll just read this description of the forest. Leaf forms trembling, page 49, did I say that? Leaf forms trembling in the forest pool of marble, where monks at night once listened for tiger's breath. We watch a long green snake loop itself through the ironwork, then belly flop into the dry teak leaves behind the sun-spattered terracotta Buddha. Impossible for some minutes to keep eyes closed, to stop listening for slither. Insuperable biases of language, one side talking spirits and devas, the other of superstition. I only know that when I come back by taxi and step through the forest gate, my pace slows. I stop looking for the purple sunbirds as I feel breathed into me something from beyond this linguistic aporia. Around us on all sides, the slow creaking of the tall bamboos. Big leaves you can almost hear when they zigzag down through the butterflies from the dipterocarpus and strangler figs in the almost sunless gloom. The darkness of the forest opening the darkness within us. The Wat, that's the temple, the Wat once walled inside the forest as Thailand in Buddhism, and now the forest, or what is left of the forest, walled inside the Wat. It's a very dubious future for this tradition of forest monks because Thailand is now almost totally deforested. And it's a great tragedy because it's a very powerful living tradition that is being threatened largely by American technology. I'm going to read, the first 7 poems in the book are called Canadian poems, and I'll just read maybe 2 of them. The first one is a pastoral reminiscence of my Uncle Arthur. I had 2 Uncle Arthurs. And this one was an Anglican priest who was sent down into a tiny, tiny village in the eastern townships, which was a declining neighborhood being taken over by the French Canadians. So there really wasn't much use for an Anglican priest there. But anyway, I'll read the poem. It's page 3. It's the first poem of the book, The Power of Prayer. And it has an epigraph. Hath not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? 1 Corinthians 1:20. People said my Uncle Arthur was a saint. He was very gentle. He absolutely never raised his voice. Such an odd contrast to my grandfather, the outgoing, beloved padre, who had inspired thousands in the trenches of France, and whose church of St. Matthew's on the ramparts of Upper Town, Quebec, overlooked the Vulgate people with no reason to share his faith in the British Empire, who had rioted against conscription until 60 of them were shot. My grandfather willed that Arthur, his young curate, should be married to his daughter, my Aunt Mary, who, to Arthur's confusion when they met, was disguised in men's clothes and smoking a pipe. There was trouble with the Bishop of Quebec, something to do with high church candlesticks and incense, versus the muscular Christianity that means business. And when my grandfather retired, they sent Uncle Arthur down from the secular city to the eastern townships, where parish names were English, St. James of Compton, St. Barnabas of Milby. But by then the inhabitants were mostly Roman Catholic and French. They lived in a large rectory. I'll try it again. They lived in a large rectory with a wood-burning stove, clear spring water from Windy Hill with an occasional newt in it, a hand-cranked telephone on the wall that worked well, except on Sunday mornings when Mrs. Spaulding, the operator, was at Mass, and towards evening, the sound of distant cowbells, the cows coming home by themselves to be milked. My Uncle Arthur rarely drove. I remember one Sunday morning when, in Coaticook for the Eucharist service, he unloaded his black leather bag with the wafers, wine, chalice, paten, his alb, chasuble, and stole from the trunk of their pre-war Plymouth, and lay it on the sand behind the car. Aunt Mary, still at the wheel, where she could not see, began to back up into what was, for a few seconds, an impending crisis of vehicular sacrilege. I remember both my own secular shout laced with adrenaline, "Stop the car, Aunt Mary!" And, turn the page, Uncle Arthur, with his prayerful fingers, his influent smile fixed on a sphere I had not yet glimpsed, saying very gently, in that meekness of spirit that shall inherit the earth and has changed my life, Marie, Marie. So